And moving on to markets now, on Wednesday, I was joined by Dr. Scott Irwin, an agricultural economist at the University of Illinois, to discuss a range of topics, including the record number of farm bankruptcies being filed across the country. Last time we talked with Dr. Irwin, we discussed market facilitation payments that would offset some of the heat ag producers were feeling from the trade war with China. We began this segment by asking why we're seeing such an uptick in Chapter 12 filings among ag producers, and if the trade woes, such as the trade war with China or the congressional holdup of the USMCA trade deal, have been contributing factors to producers facing these hardships.
I think those have been percolating for the last 5 years with the sharp drop in prices that we've seen from the peak years of 2007 through 2013 for the last 5 years. Any operation that was very aggressive during the boom years in terms of prices, in terms of bidding for cash rents, buying land, leverage, has really suffered for the last 5 years. And that's the main reason why we're seeing this uptick in the farm bankruptcies.
All right. So we all know what a miserable season it's been for farmers, battling the weather here in the Corn Belt. In fact, our last discussion revolved around a lot of late planting as we're heading into the end of the growing season for many crops. How are we looking with current harvest conditions?
It has really, truly been kind of a biblical year for U.S. Corn Belt farmers, particularly in the Eastern Corn Belt. It started, record wet and record unprecedented late plantings. Mm-hmm. The summer growing season ended up being reasonably good in many places, and there's still some good yields out there. But the end of the 2019 growing season and the harvest period is just kind of jaw-dropping about the amount of negative weather events that have occurred. We had an October winter blizzard in the upper Dakotas, a couple of hard killing freezes before the normal freeze dates, and we've had an accumulation of snow. It's incredible wetness in much of the Midwest, and now we're going to be faced next week with some of the coldest weather I've ever heard of in November. So it's really a terrible finish in many areas to the 2019 growing season. Beyond just the discomfort that it causes farmers and the difficult field conditions, it's certainly not helping our late maturing and crops that are still standing in the field, which there's a lot. About a quarter of the soybeans are still unharvested, and roughly half of the corn right now. So we have a huge amount of our crops still sitting out in the field and under just kind of an assault from the weather conditions.
So Scott, how much of a factor has weather been in the harvest season, and what should producers be keeping an especially close eye on as we prepare for the next planting season?
Well, I think there's two things that are going to be foremost in everybody's minds that watches the markets. One, how are we going to finish up this season? Are we going to end up with the backlog of fall tillage that never gets done this year, just like we did last year, which put us behind the 8 ball last spring? And it sure looks like we're going to have something like that. I mean, it's going to freeze up hard for a long period of time, starting about Sunday night this week. And that may help actually in getting some of that final crop out. But it's really going to present difficulties in getting the fall tillage done after harvest that we would normally want to see. And then, of course, the big thing looking forward is what kind of recovery in terms of corn and soybean planted acreage are we going to see next year, assuming we don't have the same kind of record wet planting conditions that we did last year, or this year, excuse me.
And Scott, before we let you go, do you have any marketing tips or advice you'd like to share with our viewers as we get in the home stretch of the harvest season?
Well, I maintain a moderately bullish bias in my own views, which would lean towards not being too aggressive at selling out of the field, and I think that's probably the way many farmers are behaving anyway. I'm particularly concerned about the effect of the fall weather on harvested acreage and yield for soybeans. The quarter of the soybeans that are sitting out there, and most of them in North Dakota that are unharvested, huge millions of acres of unharvested soybeans out there, are going to take anywhere from 0 to 5 degree lows for 3 or 4 days next week. And what I remember is when you go back and harvest those beans, that's not good for harvest loss. So I maintain I'm most concerned about production declines in soybeans compared to corn, but this probably isn't even good for corn as well. So that gives you a little bit of a slight bias tilt. It's slight because the demand news, particularly for corn, is not very good right now.